This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources parents, families, and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This podcast is brought to you by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. We're so grateful that you joined us this morning. Also joining us via Zoom is Dr. Will Cole. And Dr. Will Cole, I'm going to have you introduce yourself so that you can accurately describe what you do and all the cool stuff you do.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm a functional medicine practitioner, so my heart and my passion is really immersing myself in complex cases. We primarily have what's called a virtual functional medicine practice. It's telehealth, where I get to consult patients around the world via webcam, the way that we're talking now. And we drop ship labs to them and we'll get to the root cause of why they are going through what they're going through. Why are they having these symptoms? So my doctorate is from Southern California, University of Health Sciences in Los Angeles. And my postdoctorate education and training is in functional medicine and clinical nutrition. So I've been doing this for the past 11 years. And everything that I do other than consulting patients is just an extension of that. So I've written 2 books, Ketotarian, my first book, and my second book, The Inflammation Spectrum. And I host a podcast or 2, and that's also an extension of what I love doing. It's just functional medicine and talking to patients. So I host Goop Fellas, which is Goops. Goop is, for people that don't know, it's Gwyneth Paltrow's wellness brand. So Gwyneth and Elise host the main one, and Seamus and I host the Guy spinoff called Goop Fellas. And I host a keto talk as well. It's a ketogenic sort of biohacker wellness podcast with Jimmy Moore. So I do all of that, and I have 2 kids, a wife, and 2 golden doodles. I don't know how I do it, but
hey, you gotta love those golden doodles. We're still in the puppy stage with ours, and it is
sweet.
They're
a magical dog, man. They're really cool.
They're fantastic.
I love them. Yeah, my wife sometimes thinks I give them too much attention and her not enough attention, so I have to work on that. But.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for being on. My wife and I have been on our keto journey for the last about 9 months, and it has totally transformed our lives. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I'd love to talk about the functional medicine piece and how that benefits mental health as well. And so we can go in a couple different directions today, but these are things that we preach to our clients and and really help get them in alignment with good health. And it's not just the way that everybody thinks it should be, I think is the modern medicine, the modern American diet, all that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead.
And Dr. Cole, just as a foundational point for some of our listeners, could you give, and I wonder also if your definition of functional medicine is different than what we might see if we did a Google search. But kind of lay a foundation for what is functional medicine.
Sure. So if I had to differentiate functional medicine from conventional mainstream medicine, first thing, we interpret labs using a thinner reference range. So anybody that's listening, they know, okay, when I go to my doctors and I get the labs, I get my number, and then I'm compared to this reference range, this X to Y interval. Well, we get that reference range from a statistical bell curve average of people who go to labs. So people that predominantly go to labs, sadly, are not the healthiest bunch of people. And it's certainly not a way to know how you can feel your best. So a lot of times people are going to their doctors. They say, okay, I know something's not right here. And the labs come back, quote unquote, normal. And what the doctor is unintentionally telling them is you're a lot like the other people with health problems that you're being compared to. Just because something's common doesn't necessarily mean it's normal. Ubiquity doesn't necessarily equate with normalcy. And I would say that it's really not helpful. It's helpful for the extreme cases. It's helpful for the people that are really bad to even be worse than the bell curve. But I would say there's a lot of people that fall through the cracks that aren't optimal, that don't feel well, but are still quote unquote normal. So if you take people with health problems out of that reference range, what's left is the functional range, or where your body is functioning the best. And that's where we get our name, functional medicine. So it's where vibrant wellness resides. that's typically a tighter range within that larger reference range that we are comparing people to. So we get super geeky and put things on spreadsheets and looking at optimal ranges and track the data. And so we are really looking at these root components, these gray areas. And it's not just from looking at the optimal range, but we also are running more comprehensive labs. So it's very oversimplified and simplistic in the conventional standard for many different chronic health problems, because they just are trained to diagnose a disease and match it with a medication. So they just need the high TSH to give levothyroxine. They need the high blood pressure to give the blood pressure medication. They need the high cholesterol above 200 to give the statin drug. They need the glucose above 100 to get all these basic sort of major pharmaceuticals that a lot of people are on. That's what they're screening for. But there's a lot of people that fall through the cracks of that. So we're looking at what's the root cause. I mean, nobody's sick from a medication deficiency. But let's actually find out, okay, if there's a thyroid problem, why is there a thyroid problem? Why is the TSH out of range? So we run a full thyroid panel. If cholesterol is above 200, that may or may not be even a problem, because half of people who have heart attacks and strokes actually have normal to low cholesterol. So what's going on there? We ask the question why and go upstream. So we run more comprehensive labs based on a health history. So we run the most relevant labs to get like I use this analogy, what are the stones that are most likely to have something underneath it? So we want to look and do some sleuthing to find out what's going on. And then we realize we're all created differently. So there's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach. So we tailor healthcare to the individual. So you could have 100 people with, let's say, chronic fatigue syndrome. That's just a diagnosis of saying how you feel. Right. What's actually driving that fatigue? That's going to be different from person to person. So we're looking at hormonal problems or toxicity issues or chronic infections or gut problems or nutrient deficiencies or a confluence of those factors that are giving rise to that check engine light, that diagnosis code, that symptom. So that's in a nutshell what we do. We use food as medicine. We use natural medicines. We use pharmaceuticals when needed. I could keep going on, guys. I don't want to bore you, but this is my yeah.
Well, that's what I do. That doesn't bore me at all. Actually, I could, I could ask 1,000 questions. It's really, I love what you're saying, because this is kind of how we run our practice too, is that we, when somebody comes in and they say they're depressed, we don't take that for face value. We want to go, okay, what is going on? I'm not going to send you off to get medication, because that's just masking the symptom. It's not, or the root cause. It's not, it's an indicator of something deeper going on. And so we investigate that with our practice as well. And our 23 counselors, really dig deep to figure out what is the root cause of that verbal agreement with the word depression, and so we go deeper as well. So I love how these pair nicely in that. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this. I think hearing your story and kind of what drew you to this field would be really interesting for our listeners as well.
Yeah, so I grew up in a home that was interested in wellness as a whole. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I was the strange kid that was drinking the adaptogenic tonics and the the raw goat's milk, and very, very crunchy. And I thought that it was normal, but it was not normal. So when I go to school and see my lunch versus everybody else's lunch, I learned quickly that there was a difference going on there. But I learned to own it for myself as I got older. It wasn't just something that my mom did or my dad did or we had to do as kids. And it's such a different age now, right? I mean, I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. They have so many more options than I had back then. There was like one of everything. Yep. Back in the day. Now there's a whole massive industry that with endless choices as far as natural foods are concerned. But I owned it for myself when I was in high school. Again, another strange move. Normal people aren't doing that in high school. But I started eating very clean as a teenager, and I owned it for myself. I went and grocery shopped myself largely. I went and was interested in the different products that are out there, because by that point there were more options there. And then I knew I wanted to get formally trained in it. So I went to Southern California University of Health Sciences. And then I learned of a guy because that was just a larger integrative health school. So there's DCs, MDs, LACs, MDs, all kind of there learning different modalities and their own schools of medicine in specific ways. I heard of a guy who had gone to my school. He was older than I was, but he was talking about functional medicine. His name was Datis Karazian. Or even today, Datis Karazian is one of the pioneers of functional medicine, and he teaches for the Institute for Functional Medicine, IFM, and that's who trained myself and my team now, and that trained the doctors at the Cleveland Clinic's Functional Medicine Center. So that's kind of my, like, how I heard about it specifically, instead of this larger, broader, natural healthcare or complementary healthcare. It was going to be specific to functional medicine. It just made complete sense. To me, it was like a perfect amalgamation of Western medicine, which is being the best of Western medicine, which is being evidence-based and running labs and being legitimate in that way. And then the best of alternative health, which is getting people healthy and getting to the root cause. And so to me, it was a perfect marrying of those both schools of the best of both worlds. And I graduated knowing that I wanted to see people online. It was really not a thing back then. It was very rare, but now it's more of a common thing. But yeah, so I've been doing what I'm doing now. I've been doing it for 11 years. It hasn't changed.
And you're in the you are in the East Coast, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in the best city of the world. I don't know if you knew that or not, but it's Pittsburgh.
Oh, very nice.
It's official.
Yes,
it's the best city in the world. Yeah.
We'll actually be out there in a couple of weeks, at the end of February or end of May, for I'm speaking in New York City, but we're going to make a stop in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and stuff just for fun. So
awesome, yeah.
Or
on the other side of the state. Pennsylvania is like a long state, but I'm on the west side of it. But
okay.
Yeah, I'll be in New York next week too. I travel on the weekends. I see patients during the week online. I really could be anywhere, but my team is here.
Sure.
So we're consulting patients online, but we're centered here. So we work great as a team. And then I travel on like long weekends. I'll be in New York next weekend.
I love it.
Speaking. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that we promote on the podcast is just talking about things that we don't talk about as a society. And I think one of those is health, right? And just kind of the medical field in general. And so I'd love for you to kind of give an overview of the ketogenic diet, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about that. When I tell people I'm on like keto journey, they look at me and going, what, all you're doing is eating bacon? And I'm like, no, like it's a lot more than just that. So,
oh goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, just give us a little overview of what the ketogenic diet is and why that is something that people should consider when it comes to this total health, this whole health perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So a ketogenic diet is, by its definition, a high-fat, moderate protein, low carbohydrate diet. So moderate protein is the key word there, because just all low carb diet, just because it's a low carb diet doesn't necessarily mean it's a ketogenic diet.
Right.
And the goal of the ketogenic diet is to put the body in ketosis, in nutritional ketosis. So what that means is it's a natural state that humans would have been in bouts of it or times of it, seasons of it, for the totality of human history. So it is a mechanism that our body has, and you're just tapping into what our body's potential is there. And it's a natural fat burning state. Most people in the West have real metabolic rigidity or metabolic inflexibility. So they're always stuck in this sugar burning mode. So it's akin to sort of kindling on a fire. Yep. Kindling, you put the kindling on, it creates light, it creates energy, but it's short lived. So you have to keep putting more kindling on all throughout the day to maintain that flame, that fire. That flame is your energy levels. That's your fuel. And kindling is sugar, eating sugar for fuel. And that's sugar or things that break it down into sugar, like grains and carbohydrates and pastas and cereals and legumes and fruits even, and all of the things that even are natural but still break down into carbohydrates. All of those foods can be fine, but if that's all that you're burning, if you're only burning kindling on the fire, it's going to make you hangry if you miss a meal. Yep. It's going to, depending on the type of kindling you're putting on, you can have dirty kindling like the standard American diet, or you can have cleaner kindling, but it's kindling nonetheless. The alternative is putting a log on the fire. It burns longer. It's more sustainable. You don't have to refill it as much as often. And that's burning fat for fuel. And that's what nutritional ketosis or the ketogenic diet, ketogenic is using ketones for fuel. And that's what the ketogenic diet is. So that high fat, moderate protein, low carbohydrate diet is allowing our body to tap into that potential, to get off that blood sugar roller coaster, to create more sustainable energy throughout the day, and to use our own fat for fuel if that's a goal for somebody. But it doesn't have to be. It could just be strictly all the other health benefits of the ketogenic diet. Ketones pass through the blood-brain barrier, so it's great for brain function. It's an epigenetic modulator. It's a signaling molecule, meaning it does cool things for our health. It lowers inflammation levels. Like basically a lot of people have high inflammation levels, and ketones like beta hydroxybutyrate, the main ketone that our body naturally produces, downregulates these pro-inflammatory cytokines like the NF-kappa B, COX-2, the NLRP3 inflammasome. Basically, these pro-inflammatory cytokines calms it down and brings up all these good, like helpful antioxidant pathways, like the NRF2 pathway, the AMPK pathway. So really cool stuff. And it improves mitochondrial function, which is great for the brain. Like I said, it lowers brain inflammation specifically. And it does a lot of other cool things too. So that is what I talk about in Ketotarian. It's a clean ketogenic diet. It's mostly plant-based, but there's wild-caught fish, fresh seafood, great things like extra virgin olive oil, and nuts and seeds, and avocados and avocado oil, coconut cream, like a lot of good, whole, nutrient-dense foods. That's the way that I advocate the ketogenic diet. The Ketotarian is sort of a play on words. It's the sort of alchemy of being plant-based, but also being fat adapted or keto. And like you said, like it's most people think it's just bacon and butter all day long, but that is a way to go keto, but I would call that more of a dirty ketogenic diet. And just because something puts you in ketosis doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy for long-term health. Right. And again, to my earlier statement with labs, just because something's better, I would say maybe the dirty ketogenic diet in the short term is better. Just because something's better doesn't necessarily mean it's optimal.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, just to let our listeners know, I mean, over the last 6-8 months, I've lost 45 pounds and I've got another 25 to go, but it's awesome. It's been 2-3 pounds a week. It's not been this deep dive, it's reorienting, the way we look. And we have your book, and have used a lot of that for our guidance. So we'll definitely be putting that on our links to get a hold of that. And that it's been a great resource. But it's interesting that you're saying all these things, because these are the things that we try our best to preach to our clients too, that mental health might not be mental health. It might be, inflammation. It might be this, it might be that, it might be other things. And, we do our best to try to, and functional medicine is becoming more and more accessible here in Colorado. It's taken some time. And still, I think it's people are kind of skeptical. And so what would you say to somebody that is kind of on the fence going, maybe I should take a look from a functional medicine perspective versus the traditional medicine perspective, convince me that that's a better route to go. And because I know we have a lot of quote unquote traditional type clients and people that are listening that hear what we're saying. They are considering it. They think it's a good idea, but they're kind of caught in that narrative of history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really feel like times are changing and we're having a paradigm shift as a society. And I think I know a lot has changed in the past 11 years of me consulting patients online. It was like what was considered radical 11 years ago, like you could reverse diabetes. How no, you always have diabetes, is now really, really common that people know diabetes is lifestyle and you can reverse this. And of course, there's genetic predispositions for insulin resistance, absolutely. But those people can manage their symptoms through lifestyle changes in the overwhelming majority of cases. So that's just one example. I think people are waking up to that. I think that cultural authority is shifting too. I think it's shifting away from sort of the mainstream medicine, and it's shifting to other ways, and it's shifting to the people as well. I think there's a democratization of healthcare that's happening because of the internet, because of the system itself is not helping a lot of people. Right. So I think that ultimately we need to realize that if something's working for you, if you feel fantastic, keep on doing what you're doing. I'm not here to change anybody's mind or convince them. But if something isn't working for you, you have to realize that doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. You have to do something different to see something different. So I would say for the person that feel great, that they've got their jam down, they're feeling fantastic, keep doing it. Awesome. But there's a lot of people, they keep doing the same thing and they're not seeing changes. So at what point are you going to realize, oh, I can keep to my one thought that this is right for me, but if it's not producing the results you're looking for, the only one that's hurting is you. So and ultimately too, institutions, mainstream institutions like the Cleveland Clinic, they open up multi-million-dollar functional medicine centers. They're not opening it up on a whim. They're not opening up flippantly or because it's like fringe. There's been enough vetting done where the Cleveland Clinic would put millions of dollars into open functional medicine center, and many, many, many other conventional institutions have opened up integrative and functional medicine centers too, because the data is there, because the results are there, because it is efficacious, because it's saving people money in the long run when you get them healthy. So I think that people that are still skeptical of it, they're not really paying attention. I say that with love, but they're not really paying attention to where things are at today.
Well, and Dr. Cole, I'm wondering for that skeptical person, or maybe even the person that feels like they are too busy, or there's too many factors to dive into. What is one like practical step that they could take towards living a little bit healthier, on top of probably reading one of your books? What's something they can start with?
Well, I appreciate that. So that I've heard every excuse under the sun, right?
Yeah.
Is that I'm too busy, I'm this. Yeah, all of our patients are working class people. They're all busy people. They're very well informed and educated people, but they're very busy. And so we're used to making this realistic and sustainable for people depending on what they need to do. Not everybody needs to do the same thing. But if you're talking about some low-hanging nuggets of truth that most people could benefit from just today, that you don't need a functional medicine for, a functional medicine doctor for, you don't need even a book for, I would say first, decrease the amount of sugar you're eating. And a lot of times people are like, still like, yeah, like they know that, right? We know that as a culture, but there's still, if they really looked at their breakfast, lunch, and dinner and took inventory of what they were consuming, they're having either things with sugar in it, or they are having things that break down into sugar in too high levels of it. So even if it's like looking at just a one day, I don't even like food tracking long term. I think it makes food very unfun and not so light and easy. But do a little self experiment for yourself, for the person that's out there that's like, how am I fueling my body? Download an app like Chronometer. It's spelled Cronometer, or MyFitnessPal, or any app out there, and like track what you're having in a day. But I like Chronometer, and I have no affiliation with them, but I like them because they have sort of health metrics in there for what a healthy macronutrient ratios should be. And it doesn't have to be ketogenic, it could be something else. But to get an idea of what you're fueling your body with versus what this app is kind of breaking it down for. And people are surprised how much sugar they're consuming. So look, I recommend Ketotarian. If someone's in ketosis, they're going to be about 50 grams or less of net carbs. And that can be kind of radical for some people in the keto community. They think that's too high, but I mean, somewhere 50 grams or less. And then I talk about cyclical ketotarian, where you can go in and out of ketosis. At that point, moderating your carbs, you'd be out of ketosis. For most people, you better be out of ketosis. Somewhere between 50 to 150 grams of carbs. When you moderate your carbs, you bring in things like sweet potatoes or extra fruits, or white rice or wild rice or something like that. And then you can go back into ketosis when you want. I eat a cyclical ketotarian approach. I'm not always in ketosis. So they should check where their carb intake is. They should look at how much carbs and fats and proteins they're having in a day. So be mindful of how you're fueling your body. So that's going to be decreasing the amount of sugar probably, and increasing the amount of healthy fats. So wild caught fish, fresh seafood, avocados, olives, soaked nuts and seeds. We talk about in the book, soaking them to make them more digestible, more usable, more bioavailable. I would say for vegetables, cooking your vegetables. Like a lot of times people have lots of raw vegetables because they think I'm going healthy. I'm gonna have a big kale salad and lots of raw vegetables, and that can be hard to digest. A lot of people have gut problems, and they're not breaking down foods very well. So I recommend cooking, steaming them, sautéing them, having soups and stews to make them more digestible, because it's going to make the nutrients that are left more bioavailable and easier to digest. So those are some things that people can do today. And then the other tip I would say is non-food, but it's just getting out in nature and getting silence time, getting stillness time.
Yep.
And that's free.
Yeah, right.
Just turning off your phone, getting out in nature is free. And all the other stuff is low cost anyways.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think one of the big things that we need to, I always tell my patients too, is realize that they've renamed sugar 20 different times now. So download a list of all the different names of sugar, dextrose and this, that, and the other thing. And
yeah, and very healthy sounding ones too. But the euphemisms are endless.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time today. I know you're a busy guy, but just appreciate just the willingness to sit and talk with us. I think this is a conversation that we definitely need to continue with just in our society, but definitely with our mental health. State of mental health, in the United States it's a big deal because a lot of it can be, I think, mediated and cared for through nutrition and through activity. And not medication, which is kind of our push. But we really appreciate you and what you're doing, and we will definitely be posting a link to your website and then also your podcasts, and then a link to your book as well. And I highly recommend Ketotarian. It's one of my favorites.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Cole, I thank you. I look forward to meeting you in person one of these days when we get together with Dr. Leaf's stuff. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. We are so glad that you are here today, and we hope that if something came up for you that piqued your interest or that you have more questions about, you feel the freedom to call Mayfield Counseling Centers. We're not just here for people in Colorado Springs. We want to help everybody we can. So if you have any questions, email us at candid@mayfieldcounseling.com, or you can check out our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page, where we post resources on a pretty consistent basis. We'd love to help you in whatever we can. Feel free to reach out.